missed kicks, momentum-shattering penalties. The kind of back-breaking errors that make you question whether the team's cursed or just stubbornly allergic to progress. But out of all the heartbreak, the boos, and the deafening silence in the locker room afterward, one moment cut through the noise. Not a touchdown. Not a pick six. Just Shedeur Sanders, rookie backup quarterback, not even dressed to play, walking over to the rookie kicker who just missed 2 game-defining kicks, and simply putting a hand on his shoulder. No speeches. No dramatic movie monologue. Just quiet, calm reassurance. And somehow, that became the most important play of the game.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Because in that moment, when the city of Cleveland collectively threw its hands in the air for the 1,000th time, when fans were doom-scrolling and typing angry Reddit posts about another Browns and G of a winnable game, Shedeur stood still. And stood with his teammate. And yeah, it went viral. Because that's the kind of gesture that makes people stop and ask, wait, who is this kid? Because this wasn't just some media-trained, empty gesture. It wasn't for the cameras. This was a rookie, not even the starting QB, taking on a leadership role in a locker room that was spiraling. And for Browns fans? That moment felt like a thread of hope in a tapestry of chaos. Let's be honest, the Browns have perfected the art of heartbreak. They don't just lose games. They stage Shakespearean tragedies every Sunday. Remember the time they blew a 13-point lead in 133? Or when their kicker missed 3 game winners in a single half? The team has talent, sure. But when the pressure's on, they fold. Not because they're bad, because something deeper is broken. It's not just execution. It's not just coaching. It's culture. And culture doesn't change with a new coach or a flashy wide receiver. Culture changes with moments. Tiny, almost forgettable moments, like a rookie standing next to another rookie and saying without words, "You're not alone." That's what Shedeur did. And it's not just impressive. It's rare. Especially in Cleveland. A franchise so rattled by its own past, so paranoid about its own identity, that any sign of strength or leadership often feels like a mirage. But here's Shedeur, acting like a 10-year vet, in a stadium that eats young players alive. And he's doing the one thing the Browns have been missing for decades, showing resilience when it matters most. Now look, nobody's saying Shedeur saved the franchise with one sideline interaction. He's still the backup. Still unproven at the NFL level. But if you followed this kid, really followed him, you know this is what he does. He brings steadiness. He brings presence. And he gets what leadership actually looks like in today's league. Because leadership isn't just screaming on the sidelines or calling players out in post-game interviews. It's standing up when things fall apart. It's being the calm in the storm. And somehow, this rookie backup just taught the Browns, yes, the Browns, what that looks like. You could see it in the faces of his teammates. The way they looked at him when he spoke up in the locker room post-game. Not with amusement. With respect. Not because he was perfect. But because he showed up when it counted. Meanwhile, the usual narrative returned like clockwork. Same old Browns. And yeah, it's hard to argue when they once again blew a winnable game against a rival team, in their own stadium, on national television. But this game felt different. Not because they played better. Not because they deserved to win. But because, for the first time in a long time, someone refused to point fingers. Shedeur didn't throw the kicker under the bus. He didn't hang his head. He didn't deflect or minimize. He just showed up with grace. A quiet kind of confidence that can't be taught in quarterback camps or scripted by PR teams. It's earned by paying attention. By understanding the weight of failure. By recognizing that being a teammate means being there for more than the wins. And that energy? That's infectious. It's the kind of energy that reminds you, maybe this team doesn't have to be a punchline forever. Maybe culture isn't built through splashy trades or quarterback carousel drama. Maybe it starts exactly like this, in the loss. In the moments where everything falls apart and someone says, "I've got you." Joe Flacco's presence on this team is also worth mentioning. Say what you want about his best years being behind him, but his calm, professional demeanor is exactly what this locker room has lacked. Pair that with a rising leader like Shedeur, and suddenly you've got something that looks an awful lot like a foundation. Not flash. Not gimmicks. Foundation. Because here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. The Browns' biggest enemy has never been their opponents. It's been themselves. Their inability to stay calm. Their tendency to spiral after the first mistake. Their reliance on talent instead of trust. And year after year, the same pattern repeats. But culture? Culture can break that. And culture isn't created on winning days. It's built on losing days. In the ashes. In the wreckage. When the headlines are brutal and the fans are livid and everyone wants to assign blame, that's when culture is tested. And Shedeur passed that test with flying colors. This wasn't just a PR moment. It wasn't a nice guy doing a nice thing. It was leadership under pressure. And it came from a rookie who hasn't even thrown an NFL pass yet, which should terrify opposing teams and maybe even the Browns front office. Because when your backup is the one leading the locker room, it means one of two things: either your veterans have checked out, or your future just walked in the door. And frankly, this feels like the future. A version of the Browns that doesn't collapse at the first sign of trouble. A version that doesn't point fingers, doesn't deflect, doesn't unravel. A version that can finally stop repeating history and start building something real. Of course, it's going to take more than one moment. More than one player. More than one quiet conversation on the sidelines. But that moment? It mattered. It mattered because it reminded us that this team wants to be better. It mattered because it showed the fans, and the league, that there's still heart in that locker room. Still hope. And let's be honest, Browns fans don't need perfection. They don't need a Super Bowl parade tomorrow. They just need a reason to believe. A reason to think this team is learning, growing, evolving. A reason to think the cycle can be broken. And maybe, just maybe, Shedeur Sanders is that reason. Not because he's the savior. Not because he's guaranteed to be the starter next season. But because he's exactly the kind of player who understands that football isn't just about what happens between the lines. It's about what happens after, in the locker room, on the sidelines, in the darkest moments. And in that arena, Shedeur already looks like a franchise QB. So the next time someone says, "Same old Browns," maybe pause. Maybe remember that leadership doesn't always come from the top of the depth chart. Maybe remember that culture doesn't flip overnight, but it can flip if the right voices speak up at the right time. And maybe, just maybe, this loss wasn't the end of another miserable chapter. Maybe it was the beginning of something different. Something stronger. Something real. Because if Shedeur Sanders can lead like this when he's not even in the game, imagine what happens when he is. The scoreboard says loss. The headlines say disaster. The fan forums? Oh, they're already melting down, calling for heads to roll, screaming about curses and bad karma, and we should have signed literally anyone else. You know, typical Monday in Cleveland. But if you were actually watching, really watching, you saw something most people missed. You saw a rookie backup quarterback doing something that doesn't show up on stat sheets or highlight reels. You saw leadership in the trenches of failure. And maybe, just maybe, you saw the first flicker of a culture shift. Now let's not sugarcoat this. The Browns blew it. The defense held their own. The offense had sparks. But when it mattered, the team collectively imploded. A missed field goal here. A boneheaded penalty there. And the rookie kicker? Thrown to the wolves. You could feel the fear in the stadium. That, here we go again, dread crawling up from the turf to the nosebleeds. It's a vibe Browns fans know all too well. Talent on paper, hype in the preseason, and somehow, heartbreak by the fourth quarter. But Shedeur didn't flinch. When the kicker sat alone on the bench, helmet off, shoulders slumped, you could see the weight of the city collapsing onto him. A single missed field goal doesn't lose a game, sure, but in Cleveland, that kick becomes the story. And in that moment, you know what everyone else on that sideline was doing? They were looking away. Except Shedeur. He walked right over. Sat down. Said something, quiet, calm, just for the two of them. No cameras in his face. No dramatic slow-mo moments set to emotional piano music. Just a rookie, showing compassion and steel in a room full of panic. And you know what? That's not normal. Most rookies keep their heads down. They defer. They survive. Especially backup quarterbacks. They're just trying not to breathe too loud during team meetings. But Shedeur? He's built different. Not in the cliché Instagram caption kind of way. In the way that actually matters. In the way that changes teams. And here's the kicker, no pun intended, he hasn't even played a real down yet. Let that sink in. The guy who's not even on the field is already acting like a cornerstone. Like someone who's not just here to play, but to lead. That's the kind of energy the Browns haven't had since, well, ever? No disrespect to past leaders, but this franchise has cycled through more quarterbacks than The Bachelor cycles through contestants. And every time we think we've found the one, reality hits harder than a Myles Garrett sack. But this wasn't hype. This was human. Grounded. You can't fake poise. You can't manufacture presence. And in a moment when a lot of players would have looked the other way, or worse, joined the pylon, Shedeur chose empathy. And in doing so, he might have just planted a seed. A seed that, if nurtured, could grow into the kind of locker room culture that doesn't collapse under pressure. That doesn't unravel at the first mistake. That doesn't flinch when the spotlight burns hot. Because let's talk about pressure for a second. Pressure reveals people. We've seen stars turn to stone. We've seen hype men go silent. We've seen teams with Super Bowl potential fall apart like a folding chair. But occasionally we see something else. We see that one person who, when everything's going wrong, steps up, not to point fingers, not to make a speech, but just to be there. That's leadership. That's maturity. That's rare. And it begs the question, what else is Shedeur Sanders capable of? Because sure, he was drafted as a backup. That's the box the league put him in. But how long does he really stay there when he's already leading like this? When the team, the entire locker room, sees him as a calming presence. A unifier? We talk so much about arm strength, mechanics, and footwork when it comes to quarterbacks, but what about grit? What about emotional intelligence? What about walking into a franchise soaked in generational trauma and saying, let's turn the page? That's what Shedeur's doing. And if we're being honest, Cleveland's needed a personality like this for years. Someone who's not afraid of the ghosts. Someone who doesn't care about the weight of history. Someone who's not looking to just play for the Browns, but to change what that even means. Now, yeah, he still has a lot to prove. He'll eventually have to throw under pressure. He'll have to lead game-winning drives, read defenses, and make mistakes in front of millions. And no amount of sideline leadership will matter if he can't deliver on the field. But here's the thing, we already know the guy can play. He didn't land in the NFL because of a famous last name. He earned his spot. He dominated at the college level, adapted to chaos, and carried himself with a steadiness that belied his age. So what happens when you take that talent, and this kind of mindset, and give it the reins? You stop the cycle. You stop being the team that almost wins. That chokes in the clutch. That finds new ways to invent disaster. You stop being the team that folds under pressure and becomes the team that creates pressure for others. The team that other teams fear. Because a leader like Shedeur doesn't just lift himself, he lifts everybody. The kicker who missed? He'll remember that hand on the shoulder. The lineman who blew a blocking assignment? They'll remember the way Shedeur refused to shift blame. These things matter. They build bonds. They forge identity. And identity is everything. Right now, the Browns' identity is still stuck in limbo. A mix of talent, trauma, and tension. But what if it became something else? Something stronger? Something like resilient, grounded, unshakable. That kind of identity doesn't start with wins. It starts with how you respond to losses. With who steps up when things fall apart. And that moment with Shedeur? That's what a culture shift looks like at the very beginning. And yeah, it's easy to roll your eyes. To say, one kind gesture doesn't fix decades of dysfunction. Sure, of course it doesn't. But every movement starts somewhere. Every culture shift starts with one person acting differently. Leading differently. Showing the rest of the team, this is who we can be now. That's what Shedeur did. He didn't panic. He didn't pout. He didn't post a cryptic Instagram story. He just showed up for his teammate. And that single act might carry more weight than any stat line. So let the media focus on the L. Let the talking heads argue about who blew the coverage, or whether the coach should have iced the kicker, or if Flacco's arm still has juice. That's all noise. The real story? A rookie quarterback, quiet, focused, calm, refusing to let a teammate sink in his shame. Refusing to let this be just another Browns disaster. And in doing so, giving fans, teammates, and maybe even the city something it hasn't felt in a long, long time. Not flashy hope. Not hype train hope. Earn hope. The kind of hope that comes when someone walks into a broken system and doesn't just survive it, but begins to heal it. So here's to Shedeur Sanders, the backup who might already be the heartbeat. The rookie who reminded us that leadership isn't about spotlight, it's about showing up when it matters most. And maybe, just maybe, the quarterback who's going to help Cleveland believe again. For the first time in a long time, after another typical Browns implosion, the story didn't end with a coach blaming execution. It didn't end with a quarterback dodging questions or a wide receiver unfollowing the team on Instagram. The most talked about moment after that Bengals loss was a rookie backup showing more leadership in one gesture than this franchise has seen in years. Shedeur Sanders didn't just comfort a kicker. He refused to let the narrative spiral. He looked into the eyes of a broken teammate and said, without saying a word, "You are not the reason we lost. We're in this together." You cannot buy that kind of culture. You cannot fake that kind of leadership. And what's more important, you can't coach it either. You either have it, or you don't. And Shedeur? He has it in abundance. That moment with the kicker, it wasn't a PR stunt. It wasn't a manufactured, look at me play. In fact, if you weren't paying attention, you might have missed it entirely. There were no booming locker room speeches. No cameras shoved in his face asking for a reaction. It was subtle, intentional, quietly powerful. And that's what leadership often looks like in real life. Not fireworks. Not viral soundbites. Just someone standing up when everyone else wants to sit down. Now think about the implications of that kind of mindset over the course of a season. You've got a locker room full of talent. Guys like Amari Cooper, Myles Garrett, David Njoku, all capable of elite-level play, but talent without trust? Without composure? It's just potential waiting to implode. Shedeur brings something else. Something intangible. He's not trying to outshine the veterans. He's not trying to prove anything by being loud. He's winning people over the old-fashioned way, by being dependable, present. It's no accident that players are already gravitating toward him. You see it in practice, the way guys listen when he talks. You see it in meetings, the way he pays attention, not just to the scheme, but to the people around him. He's not just learning the playbook. He's studying the team. And maybe that's why the moment hits so hard. Because the Browns have always had guys who could run routes, make tackles, sling deep balls. But what they've lacked? Emotional leaders. Culture carriers. People who don't just say, next play, after a mistake, but mean it, and make everyone else believe it too. It's easy to write this off as a feel-good moment. Just a rookie doing a good deed. But honestly, that would be missing the point entirely. This isn't just about a loss. Or even about Shedeur. It's about a signal. A signal that the winds might finally be changing in Cleveland. Not because of a flashy acquisition or a hot start, but because of something subtler, a shift in mentality. For too long, this team has been reactive, fragile. The kind of team that plays not to lose once they get a lead. The kind that sees a missed kick and spirals into 3 more mistakes. The kind that plays like they're dragging the ghosts of every blown lead and every paper-thin season behind them. But now, maybe they start playing like a team that believes again. Believes in each other. In the process. In the idea that, yes, mistakes will happen, but they don't have to define you. They don't have to doom you. And belief? That's dangerous. Because belief is contagious. Especially when it comes from someone like Shedeur, who, let's be real, had every reason not to care. He's a backup. It wasn't his game on the line. He could have kept his head down and moved on. No one would have blamed him. But that's not who he is. Because while the rest of the world was writing headlines about a kicker's failure, Shedeur was already playing the long game. Already planting the kind of seeds that grow into something bigger than stats or standings. The team. And let's talk about Joe Flacco for a second. You've got this veteran quarterback, Super Bowl MVP playoff killer, standing across from Shedeur, watching the same game, the same collapse. And guess what? He didn't have to say a word. Because when he saw Shedeur walk over to that kicker, he knew what that was. It was the passing of a torch, not for the QB1 spot, not yet, but for the voice in the locker room. For the guy everyone looks at when things go wrong. Flacco's been there. He's seen it all. And his presence is steady, sure. But Shedeur's presence? That's new. And new energy is exactly what this team needs. It's not just about flipping the record. It's about flipping the identity. Turning this team from one that panics under pressure into one that responds. One that stops playing the victim and starts writing its own narrative. And that narrative? It might just begin with a rookie sitting next to a heartbroken kicker and saying, "It's not over. We've got your back. You're one of us." It's quiet moments like that that build dynasties. Not immediately. Not overnight. But brick by brick. And if the Browns are ever going to get out of this endless loop of failure and frustration, that's how it starts. Not with a Hail Mary. With a hand on the shoulder. A team that refuses to break under pressure is a team that can't be counted out. And Shedeur is teaching them that resilience doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be consistent. So yeah, go ahead. Let the rest of the league laugh at the Browns again. Let the analysts say, "Same old story." Let the tweets fly and the memes roll in. But when the smoke clears, remember this. There's a kid on this team who didn't flinch. Who didn't run from the moment. Who chose connection over comfort. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what Cleveland has been waiting for. Because when the dust settles and the season grinds on, it won't be the highlights that hold this team together. It'll be the trust, the unity, the culture. And that culture? It's being built right now. Quietly. Steadily. One moment at a time. Led by a rookie who already looks like a leader. Shedeur Sanders hasn't played a down, and somehow, he's already winning the locker room. Now imagine what happens when he takes the field. Game on.